counselors and us to follow up. It's important that we do that, otherwise the recurrence rate goes up dramatically. So research after research has shown the number one cause for recurrence. Even in the hands of Ponseti, you won't believe it. Ponseti's recurrence rate was 49% in the first year. 49%, it's huge in the hands of the master. But it came down dramatically only after the foot abduction brace protocol was changed. This is extended from 1 year to 2 years to 3 years to 4 years to now 5 years. The current protocol is the foot abduction brace has to be there for 5 years minimum. There are papers which talk about extension in children who are having dynamic supination. We'll tell you what it is. Okay, so quickly, why do you need a foot abduction brace? The correction was achieved by abducting the supinated foot. And the final correction was 70 degrees of abduction. Now this correction will be maintained only if you keep the foot in 70 degrees of abduction. So that's the critical part, 70 degrees of abduction to maintain that correction that you achieved. Therefore, this brace was designed. Original brace which Dr. Ponseti designed was designed by his orthotist John Mitchell of MD Orthopedics. If you go online, MD Orthopedics or the Mitchell brace, you can still get it. No issues. Online order is possible. You'll have to pay in for foreign exchange a cost of about $400 for one brace. Only $400. Multiplied by 82, it's about $3,500. That's a lot of money. Okay? So that's a huge amount of money. How do you handle that? So the Uganda Clubfoot program, which was started by Dr. Shafiq Pirani, had been started with a $5 million Canadian dollar grant. And they realized if they spend $400 for this Mitchell brace, they'll run out of money quickly. So they decided that they'll fashion something locally. Michael Steenbeek is a physiotherapist from Netherlands. So in the Uganda Clubfoot program, there were 3 key players. One was Shafiq Pirani, 2 Nogro Penny, and 3 Michael Steenbeek. They teamed up to care for the children with clubfoot. Large numbers were there, and they had very few orthopedic surgeons. So they trained the local medical officers to do the casting, and follow-up bracing was done by using local material. Wood is sufficient in Africa, enough forests are there. Leather is sufficient in Africa, enough animals are there. And steel mines are sufficient. Even your own General Steel is now owning mines in South Africa. They are there. So the African mines have enough steel. So cheap local steel, cheap local plywood and cheap local leather combined to make the key principle of the Mitchell brace was foot abduction 70 degrees. 70 degrees, that's the key thing, 70 to the vertical. There. Once you recognize the principle, you can have any shape. But as long as the abduction is there, it is good. But one has to remember, it's not 40 degrees, it's 70 degrees of abduction. Okay? But a lot of people use Dennis Brown splint. Literature also gives it as Dennis Brown splints. But, again a catch here. The catch is, your orthotists do not know about Ponseti's method. When they look up the manual for Dennis Brown splint, do you know how the Dennis Brown splint is made? Dennis Brown splint, I have used the Dennis Brown splint. It is different for unilateral and bilateral feet. For bilateral feet, it's the same as abduction bar, but the foot abduction is only 15 degrees. The Dennis Brown splint is based on a dynamic principle of kicking with one leg and pronating the other leg. It is based on a principle of pronation. Here we say no pronation, only supination. Do not encourage unilateral kicking with this brace, we only encourage bilateral kicking. The Dennis Brown splint had an L-shaped bar for unilateral children. Why? Because you wanted pronation only on the affected side. So that for the affected side, when you had the brace, the lower portion of the L came there, upper portion of the L came on the normal side. So when the normal side foot kicked, this foot went into abduction. When the affected side foot kicked, it is already lower, it does not produce any eversion on the normal side. That is the basis of the Dennis Brown splint. You can modify the Dennis Brown splint exactly as the foot abduction brace, provided you tell your orthotist. You change the abduction to 70 degrees from 15 degrees. It's possible. But then it's a foot abduction brace, not a Dennis Brown splint. The principle is different. Here it is supination, not pronation. Here it is bilateral kicking, not unilateral kicking. And here the abduction is 70 degrees, there it is 15 degrees. There's a huge difference between the two, but otherwise it's the same in terms of principles. So Steenbeek brace, named after Michael Steenbeek, the Dutch physiotherapist who designed this for use in the Uganda Clubfoot program. We have a bar. Earlier we were making it black and white, now it's colored with colored laces to make it attractive for parents and children, so they don't feel the stigma of this. You have to convince them the brace protocol is very critical. The brace protocol is, the bar is 15 degrees dorsiflexion, 70 degree abduction. The width of the bar is the width of the points of the shoulder, and it has a hole on the inner side, not on the outer side, because it is for the mother. When she is holding the child in the lap, she can see that the holes show the heel is resting nicely on the insole and the heel is not elevated. Okay, so mother to see that, and the counter of the shoe should not be high. And the abduction, the counselors have a chart like this, which can measure whether they have corrected or somebody has manipulated to a lesser abduction. Some parents do that. They reduce it and come back. No, ये तो पहन ही नहीं रहा था, so हमने कम कर दिया. So they get it done, so we double check that. And also the counter should not be too high. If it is too high, we do not recommend high counter. Why? Because a low counter, when the child plantar flexes, you cannot kick out your heel. But if there is a high counter, so that's mimicking a high counter. That's a high counter. From there, if the child now plantar flexes, there, when the child is plantar flexing, the heel is off. So with a high counter, the child is going to kick out the heel into equinus, not acceptable. So it has to be a low counter. It has to be a foot abduction brace with a 70 degree abduction of the footwear. That is important. And the brace protocol is also critical. You need to make sure that the child gets the brace. The width of the shoulder is according to the points of the shoulder length, width. Okay, 1 inch plus minus is good enough. Too wide, too much of abduction, avascular necrosis of the femoral head. Too narrow, too little abduction, nursing care of the child becomes a problem. So it is exactly the width of the points of the shoulder. That's where you keep it. And the number one cause for recurrence is failure to adhere to the protocol of bracing. That's what we want that. So the rod center distance, center to center distance is the points of the shoulder that you look at. The protocol, first 3 months, 23 hours a day. 23 hours a day. 1 hour, it doesn't have to be continuous 1 hour. It can be in between for change of nappy, for washing the child, bathing the child, all those things are there. But make sure it is by and large 23 hours a day. After that, the protocol, that's first 3 months. After that is night time and nap time. Why night time and nap time? Because these little children are very intelligent. They recognize that at night they are made to wear the brace, but in the daytime they can sleep without the brace. So they'll keep crying their lungs out till you or the grandparents or someone gets the brace off. That's what happens. So the child has to recognize that sleep is associated with the brace, therefore night time and nap time. Now the question comes, parents come, sir, wo to raat ko utar ke baithta, that's only in the older children. They learn to take it out only when they are older. So when we tell them when they get older, normally we take a pull-out knot, isn't it? So in the older children, pull-out knot is not here. We put a knot which cannot be pulled out at the sole of the foot. They can't reach around and untie that by looking into it. Those are tricks that we teach. The counselors know these tricks. We teach them how to do that. That's number one. Then the question comes, in the older children, what is the optimum time for which you need to give it? Supposing you were to look at the timing. We don't have a hardcore research into this. They have done some sensor-based studies on this, looking at a sensor placed inside, electronic sensor, and looking at the number of hours they are wearing. But we know that little babies, they tend to sleep anywhere from 10 to 12 hours. Anywhere from 10 to 12 hours. So by and large, we recommend that the post 3-month period protocol should be at least 10 to 12 hours. That long sleep is essential, because in children, they come with, as I'd like to tell my PGs, they come with formatted brains. We don't know, at least we don't know. 𝐬𝐸𝐴 may have picked up his Chakravyuh skills from entering it from his mother's womb, isn't it? He heard the story being narrated to his mother. 𝐬𝐸𝐴, if you know the story in Mahabharata. So there, you imagine that something is going on even in the intra-utero. We do not know what is there in their brains. All that we know is that long-term memory comes from long-term sleep. So therefore, these little children sleep long hours. Senior citizens like grandparents, they sleep very less. Their grey matter is atrophying. Their sleep requirement time is less. Their long-term memory is poorer. So you need to understand that these little children will sleep 12 hours or so. That's the norm. As they grow older, it may come down to 8, 10, 9, something like that. But around that much is the time required for the brace protocol. And that initially we thought at least 1 year is good enough, and then went up to 2, 3, 4. Now the current recommendation is 5. Each time the child comes, you have to check for the brace wearing. Is it happening good? Take a history, do the scoring. Every time the child comes, you have to score. Remove the shoe and check for the screw. Wear the shoe and see the size is appropriate or not. But how do you know the child has grown out of the size of the shoe? Normally, the toes should be within the edge of the front of the footwear. If it is going beyond, if I can see the fingers beyond the edge of the shoe, you know that the child has outgrown the shoe, needs the shoe. Again, for fitting of the braces, when you get the brace done first, you call the child after 1 week of follow-up. Why? Because despite the best quality leather we use, we get this. These are imported leathers that you see. The best quality leather, despite that, they have shoe bites, hush puppies. The name is hush puppy. Hushing the puppy that is causing a problem. Because shoe bites were like shoe bites by puppies. So hush puppy label came from that shoe bite being contained. And even the finest hush puppy, I have worn hush puppies and I have had a shoe bite from a hush puppy also. So even the finest leather can bite, provided the fitting is not appropriate. So when you go to buy a new shoe in a shoe shop, what do? You ask, what is your size? 8.5. Okay. So he pulls out an 8.5 size and you try it out. No, the right side is a little tight. Why? In a right-handed person, usually the right side foot may be slightly larger. He tends to prefer that. So there may be a difference. So what do? Do you go and buy size 9? No, you don't. What does the shopkeeper do? He goes and picks up another shoe of the same size. Why? From a shoe to shoe there is a difference. Why? These shoes are made from leathers, and all leathers are not of the same stretchable quality. They vary, and all leathers are not made to that level of tightness on the last around that they are made. These shoes are not made on last. That's why the plywood. These shoes are made around plywood as the sizer, whereas normal footwear is made around a last. A mochi will show you. There's a mold of a foot around which he molds the leather and stitches it together. So therefore, you tell the counselor, try a different Steenbeek brace of a same size but a different brace. That's what you do. And then check out the fitting and make sure. First visit 1 week, next visit 6 weeks, after that 3 monthly visit. Each time score the child, each time check the child is doing well and there is no recurrence, and that's all that you do. So consistency is the key to the child's parents adhering to the protocol of the brace. Never accepted this. This is a unilateral brace. Until now, there is no unilateral brace designed. So far, it's all been a bilateral brace. It has all been abduction of 70 degrees. Please do not compromise on that. And each time, as I said, check the things that I told you. Each time score the child and make sure that the instruction to the parents that the counselors will take. They have the instruction, they have a checklist, they follow. But don't let this happen. We don't want this to happen because the parents have been over enthusiastic. The child was crying. But this is not acceptable. We don't want this to happen. That's why 1 week down the line we have the visit by the parents. And I think that's it. Brace review protocol, and this chart is important. Every time the child comes to you, the chart tells you the recurrence that is happening in these children. Okay? Earlier, we were not recycling braces, but at the time of COVID, there was a huge resource crunch in terms of the material supply, leather, steel, everything was in short supply. Nothing was coming. There were no trucks going, transporting these things. So we had to use recycled material, but all the same, we never stopped the braces. Older patients, we don't know the answer. We were giving AFOs, but now we give hinged AFOs, not rigid AFOs, hinged AFOs. We have to innovate from time to time. A child came with this. What do? Fit a processes. For a moment I was stumped. Fit a processes on this side, and on the processes give one shoe and the other side give the other shoe. You can still have but important thing is keep the foot in 70-degree abduction. That's the key to maintaining your correction that you've achieved with difficulty. Okay, questions?